Hi, welcome to a Hot Take podcast, where we talk to new and trending authors from all around the world. My name is Jenna Green. I'm a YA fantasy author of the Imagine series and the Reborn Mark series. With me is Miranda O, a contemporary chick lit author, and she has the privilege and honor of introducing our guest for today. Hi, Miranda.
Hi, Jenna. Thanks for that fantastic intro. I am super thrilled and excited to introduce our guest today, Miss Marie Powell. Now, she is an author, an editor, and a publisher. So she is a master of all trades in the literary world, and she has penned poetry and children's books and YA titles. She's done it all. So welcome, Miss Marie. We are so happy to have you here today.
Great to see you again, Miranda and Jenna.
Now, I want to dive into it because we have kind of all been stagnant at home for the last year and a half. It's coming closer to 2 years than it is a year. But I hear that you absolutely love traveling and are dedicated to this castle hopper in air quotations. So I want to dive into this castle hopper, but where does this love of traveling come from? Has this always been a passion and, a must do for you?
Interesting question. The farthest we traveled when I was a kid was about 20 kilometers, I guess, to Buffalo Pound Lake from Moose Jaw. That was about it. When I actually didn't go overseas until I was in my 40s. I traveled around Canada when I was young. And then I had my kids and we traveled, in Saskatchewan and around. I just felt it was really important to kind of, see home first, if you will.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of, short trips. Like I live in Regina, Treaty 4 territory. So we went through to maybe East End, stayed there for a bit, or, just in the general vicinity of southern Saskatchewan, I guess you could say, and BC, because we have relatives there. And then I just decided that I guess I was always kind of a little bit obsessed with ancestry, my family and so on. And my grandfather had come from Wales, but nobody really knew where he had come from exactly. And I was piecing things together based on him, my grandmother, where they might have met. They're from the north, north part of the UK. And I just decided we would try going there and kind of walking the walk, not knowing where to go exactly, just trying to kind of follow my nose, if you will, and pick some, interesting places for us to visit. And I was trying to do this this is back in 2005, 2006, right? And I was trying to do it on the internet without going on some kind of guided tour or something like that. I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to do that in my heart,
Right.
We went to London, and then we got a car and attempted to drive to Wales. And the first thing I did was I drove out of the Heathrow airport in the wrong direction. We went 60 kilometers south,
Whoopsie.
And then realized, and I was driving okay, in England, you're driving on the wrong side of the road on the wrong side of the car.
Yes.
Right? It was just very disconcerting.
Yeah.
And so I figured that the slow lane must be in the wrong side as well. And it's not. So we were tootling along the, big England highway, right? And these little hot cars were kind of.
And they drive like maniacs.
Oh my God!
Oh yeah.
They're driving around me, honking their horns, and we're like, "What are they? We're in the slow lane, aren't we?" Finally realized, no, we're not. So we got into the other lane, the regular slow lane, and it was just, it was kind of ridiculous. We got about 60 kilometers before I actually realized we were going in the wrong direction. So we went into this, I saw this big sign, this big, building with a big sign on it. And it kind of looked like Canadian Tire to me. Right.
Okay.
And I thought that's going to, Canadian, if I was looking for a map and some auto help, I would go to Canadian Tire, right?
Right.
So I made the right move for once, and we got off of the big highway somehow in the many roundabouts and things that they have on English highways, and and ended up in this place. We went inside, we found a clerk. We were desperately, help us. We don't know where we are. So he showed us on the map. That's how we actually found out we were 60 kilometers in the wrong direction. And then he said, so you got to go. Anyway, he gave us good directions. We ended up in northern England eventually. we stayed for about a week in Ironbridge, which is in the Shrewsbury. My grandmother came from what we thought Shrewsbury. Well, it turns out she didn't come from Shrewsbury. She came from Acton, because which is a little town outside of Shrewsbury, which I actually had the time to track down while we were there using the British library system. And then eventually basically when we got to the cottage that we had rented in Ironbridge, I kind of pulled over into where I thought we could park, totally white knuckled, and parked the car. And I said, we are not driving the car again until we have to leave. That's it. But luckily, in England, you can go everywhere by bus, which I didn't know. So, it was just one of those, wow, what are we doing here? And how are we not prepared for this experiences?
Yeah.
Anyway, but part of the problem was that I had done all this research, didn't really have time to read through it all, gathered it all together, and then left it on the kitchen table when we left on the airplane.
As you do.
As you do.
Helped, right?
Right.
Anyway, so eventually we made it to Northern Wales, and we went to what I thought were Welsh castles, right? Carnarvon, Beaumaris. You hear these big castles, you see them online all the time. And we bought tickets. Like I bought, enough to go to 7 castles or something like that. I don't know, whatever the deal was, for me and the kids. And we started going to them, and then we realized that they're not Welsh castles. They're English castles. They were created to subjugate the Welsh. And there was this whole backstory of Welsh princes that I knew nothing about. Or if I did know anything about them, it wasn't in my head at that moment. And eventually we realized we were staying in at that point we were staying in a sheep farm, because I thought that would be cool. And it was very cool, to be on a working sheep farm in a kind of a little cottage off where the farmer was behind us. And we could contact him if we wanted to, but we were sort of completely kind of on our own for the week. And the town that we were near was called Dalwith-Ellen. And there was a big ruin there, and lo and behold, it's one of the castles of the Welsh princes. So we thought, well, geez, we're like 5 minutes away from this one. Why are we not going to this one, right? We've got these 7 tickets for 7 castles. Let's give it a go. So we went to this castle, and there was like nobody anywhere. We drove into the parking lot. There was like no other cars in the parking lot. We saw signs, that like the signs in Wales are in Welsh, right? Welsh first, English little. But these ones didn't even have words on them. They were just pictures, and they were pictures of people falling off of cliffs and stuff. So it was kind of like, okay, where are we?
Don't do that.
What are we doing, right? But we, went in, and it was just gorgeous. Like there was a waterfall, and it was like amazing countryside there, like really amazing landscape. And we went. And this big ruin on the kind of top of a hill, we went up there and we looked at it. And it was like very different from the big English castles. For one thing, it was quite small. And for another thing, it was like the entrance to it was way up in the middle of the castle. It wasn't on the main floor where you kind of expect to go in a door. And you had to go up kind of a rickety set. That was obviously where the signs were referring to, right? The rickety set of stone stairs that led up to this door. Anyway, we went up carefully, holding on to each other. It wasn't all that bad in the end, but you know what I mean. The signs kind of threw us. But anyway, we went up and we went in, and there was like nobody anywhere, no guides. You didn't have to pay your £10 or whatever to get a guided tour of this place, because there was nobody to show you around. But there were placards, like it was kind of museum-like, and you could see the areas, and it told you like the way that the Welsh people lived prior to the English invasion, and stuff that I didn't know. And it was kind of interesting to walk around and see this. And you could go up and sort of stand on the battlements, and look out on the wall walk and look out into the merlons and all that castles are supposed to have. They actually had all of the pieces that they should have had. And imagine like having read just a moment ago that there were somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 English troops besieging this castle, looking out in this lovely countryside and kind of imagining that, like, wow, and it just made me start thinking, gosh, what would that have been like? And the history of the First Nations people here in Canada, right? Where here in Regina, anyway, we knew the history, which was that the road allowance people and so on were not allowed to come into the town after 5 p.m. and they weren't allowed to speak their own language and couldn't do trade in their own language and all of that. Mm-hmm. And on this sign, on the placards, that same story happened in Wales in 1282, 1283. So it was kind of like, isn't that interesting? And then going up and looking out over the countryside just kind of got me, I don't know, I guess it struck my imagination. Yeah. It just kind of struck my imagination. And sorry, that was my cat jumping out of the window. Anyway, it just made me start thinking, like, what would that have been like if you were there, if you were Welsh at that time? How lose it, like the 1 minute you have this thriving culture and way of life is very rural, and certain things that they did that they were talking about in this castle on the placards, and then all of a sudden 1 year later you don't have that anymore. You have this complete change of way of life and of you're not allowed to use your own language anymore. You're not allowed to do trade in your city and your town. They were very rural, so these were mainly little cities and towns that they had, right? But not allowed to stay in overnight. And the English came in and built walls and brought in settlers and all this kind of stuff, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know, mixing that together with what I knew of what had happened in Canada and what happens when colonists come in and take over a country, and trying to kind of get at the heart of that was basically how this all began. And then I went back again a few years later and actually took a class in Welsh and did some more castle hopping around different castles this time. And so it's been kind of a long, interesting road. And this became my heart project very quickly, so. Of all the things that I write, it's the thing that kind of keeps drawing me back.
There's something about history. I think I went to England when I was like 15 or 16, and we were billeted. And talking to my friends when they came back and they went to like amusement parks and stuff, and I was like, me and the mom that I stayed with, we toured castles and manors for like 3 weeks with me and her. It was so nice. But I was just fascinated by it. The fact that a lot of the people that own those manors can't really afford them, right? Because and so they open them up for tourists, and so that they live in part, and then the rest. Grounds up. You're the guest. Go. Fuck.
I'm excited now, right? You got me excited. But that's true. When we went back to Wales in 2011, I guess it was, or 2011 or 2012, one of the things that was happening was an archaeological dig. There are a lot of archaeological digs in Wales now because they just got their language back, the right to use their language back in the 1990s. And so there's all this kind of cutting edge research into the history they weren't really allowed to look at for 800 years, right? The way back history. And anyway, we came to one of these very manors, just like what you're talking about. And it was thought to be the site of Garth Kellen, which is the royal court of Wales, the royal seat of the Welsh prince who was the prince in 1282. But they don't really know because they're called llys, right? And they're like a kind of a family village, if you will, where different noblemen from the House of Aberfraw would be living. And in this particular one, this woman I phoned her up because I found her on the internet, and I thought, isn't that interesting that this might be the very castle or the very place that I'm trying to write about. And I phoned her up from Canada, hi.
Hello.
Hello. How are you? And anyway, she told me that she had actually got this. She thought she was buying a sheep farm, and she ended up with this big manor house. And then she found out from the town, from people in the town, that it might have been this seat of the last Prince of Wales, the last true Prince of Wales, right? Yeah, isn't that cool? And then she said somebody, like, so the person who owned the house before her had actually found a rolled up parchment in the wall, in the stone wall that was still there from the 1300s, right? With the one side is there's like a tower and a stone wall, and that's thought to be the Tower of Llewellyn. And they call it Llewellyn's Tower in the town, which is, she was like, you mean, you know, anyway, but they found a parchment rolled up in there, and they couldn't read it. It was in some other weird language, like Norman French, you know. Anyway, so they burned it, and I was like aghast. You know, it's like, because maybe it was a love letter, you know, or I mean, who knows, right?
Maybe it was like a big piece of history. Oh my goodness!
I know. So we went there, and that's where they had the day we were there, they had an archaeological dig there, and so we were kind of poking around with that. It was really an interesting thing for me. Like, it was just an interesting sort of sideline in my life, and it became a real pivotal point. Like, I ended up writing these 2 books, and I'm now writing, you know, 3 more, a series of 3 that will take them into 1284 and past the invasion. Because so cool. I really want to deal with, I think I worked really hard on getting the history right, even though this is fantasy, and obviously, you know, there weren't Welsh people who could really transform, or
they couldn't.
No, they really couldn't. They're, you know, I know everybody thinks they, but no. Yeah,
I could talk about this for hours, because I love history, and I've traveled England and Scotland and a little bit of Ireland. But I travel with my best friend, and she's an archaeologist, and so she's into all this. But what's interesting is the amount of stuff that they lick. I did not know that like it's a thing. Like, she's always like picking up a stone and like licking it. I'm like, why? And she's like, well, to figure out if it's stone or if it's bone
or chalk, maybe.
No, fecal matter.
Oh,
why would you figure that out? Like, there's something.
Isn't there other ways to find that out? Like,
I guess if you're
petrified, hopefully.
If you're like if you don't have all your tools with you, and you just anyway.
I didn't see anybody do that, but you know.
Well, she's
probably
a professional.
For the best, right? Probably for the best. Okay, so you're not only an author, but you're also a photographer. So I'm really curious, because you've seen a lot of history. Now, is this something that you like to explore, like all, you know, everything we just kind of talked about, your travels? Outside of that, I'm assuming that is something that you like to document and explore within this medium. Is there anything else that kind of piques your curiosity or tickles your fancy, let's say, when it comes to photography?
Oh yeah, like when so I'm obviously not, 17 or whatever, right? But when I started my career as a writer, I was a journalist and a reporter, reporter photographer, and I stumbled into photography that way, and ended up taking photography at Ryerson in Toronto, and kind of back in the day when you actually had silver halide film and you developed it and you kind of got your hands dirty, creating prints and manipulating them and all that kind of stuff. So I am actually working on a story right now because in my head, in late 2010 or whatever, suddenly that just completely disappears, right? And everybody's using digital cameras everywhere, and everything gets, I have a darkroom in my basement that I haven't actually been in for about 12 years now, right? And I used to do a lot of work as a photographer, but now it's all, on your phone, right? Like, what are we doing, right?
9,042 pictures?
I know.
All of which are my child?
Yeah,
right. Right. I have used 2 Google Drive space, like 2 emails are full of photos and videos.
And your kid's like 5 months old. Mine's 5 years old.
Well, yeah,
so you've got like 5 years worth. Yeah.
Well,
she just had
mine are 31 and 26. So you can imagine how many.
She had her first day of school like 3 weeks ago, and I'm a teacher, so I can't be in 2 places at once. So I was like, okay, honey, you got to take a picture of her waking up, walking down the stairs, getting to the bottom of the stairs, And he didn't, but he did still really good. But I was like, but they did have one where he took a picture where they ran back in the house because they forgot to take one of the ones that I made him do. And so they're in the doorway. I'm like, why are you in the doorway? He's like, we totally didn't forget and had to run back in the house.
Like, yeah, of course.
Totally.
No, but I mean, it's a great way of documenting just about everything we do, right? And like, even when we were there in 2013 and we went into little museums, you could take pictures, so like it was a very different trip from 2006 to 2013. I guess it was 13 that we went the second time. You know what I mean? Just because you had all of this different equipment, and it was very different. But what got me is on, again, research, looking on you can fall down so many research rabbit holes. It's just silly. But doing research, I discovered there's a whole bunch of young people who do the old style photography, who like to use film because they don't get the instant gratification of being able to see all the pictures right away, right? You can't see what you're shooting. There's no little, viewfinder where you can check and see if you actually got the shot you were after or whatever.
Well, there's a different style of artistry to it.
Yeah,
like I've taught some photography.
That's exactly right. It's art
rule
now.
of thirds and posing and and lines and structures, but that it's just a different medium to do the same kind of it's. I mean,
see, for me, it's like the way I grew up almost doing that, right? So what I'm writing about now is a character who has this fetish or this, obsession with the old style photography. And of course, it's going to be fantasy. It is fantasy, and there is a mystery involved that can only be solved with silver halide film. It's like, why not? Right? So, I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with historical, not even that historical, but just with what was.
Oh, it's historical. You can pretend that it's not, but my childhood of waiting for the 24 prints to come back, and 17 of them are my own thumb.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And my mom getting so mad at me at Girl Guide camps where I took like 3 rolls of film and none of them are beyond my tent. It's just me and my tent mate taking pictures of different angles of the tent, and her being like, we wasted this much money so you could take pictures of you inside of your tent. Right. Glad you had fun. Go Girl Guides.
You know what? And kids that are born in the 2000s and in schools, Jenna, I'm sure you can contest to this, is that our upbringings are now referred to as the 1900s.
Oh, really?
Yes. When I found that out, I had a meltdown. I was like, what? 1900s? Like, come on. And nobody know what is a VHS or a VCR. Like, nobody knows what that is.
They did like an art display of fashion in the 80s, and it was like historic. And I was like, I don't know what I'm more mad about that, I was born in 1981, that my fashion from my childhood is called historic, or that I know that they did it wrong. I don't
or that my fashion is still the same.
I was like, in the 80s, you wore the denim overalls, but you never did both overall straps up. That wasn't cool. Right. You had one off, and so it was on the mannequin. And I was like, I know it's wrong, and I'm mad that it's historical, and I'm turning 40 in like 3 months, so I'm pretty cranky about all things age, history.
I'm not even going to talk about what I'm turning next. So,
38.
You guys are kids to me. But anyways, it's just kind of fun to play with that. Like what I like about it is the kind of intersection between the past and the current, like the past and now, right? Because like they say, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it or whatever. But there's also just knowing your history and realizing that there are these influences, like we're not like, I don't know, some people think about the Middle Ages as a time when somehow we've evolved from them. We have not. We are the same. They are pretty much the same as we are. There hasn't been a lot of evolution. Evolution takes like geological time. Do you know what I mean? Like we haven't grown anything. We don't have anything.
Where's my fourth arm?
Exactly.
And my third arm.
We have 10 fingers, 10 toes, the whole bit. So do they, right? There isn't like that to it.
And they have the same wants and needs. Like,
Yeah,
I want to be
absolutely.
loved. I want to be heard.
Sure. I want independence and freedom, all those fights that we're fighting today. They've been fighting those same fights for 800 or 900 years, right? So colonialism and all the rest of it, it's like, it's not a new thing, and it's just really interesting, I guess, to kind of dig into that a little bit and see where, if you could put yourself in their shoes, or if you could walk their walk, like, what would you do? Well,
I always say that with fantasy, because they're like, write what you know. I'm like, well, I've never met a dragon, but the emotions are the same. The wants are the same. You just add that fantastical element to it, a superpower, right? But you're still digging down to emotions.
Why write what you know? Write what you can find out about, right? Because like, really, if you're going to write what you know, that's memoir, right? If you're going to write fiction, why not push it to the limits, right? And write what could be,
I like that. We should add that as like a tagline on the pod, like, write what you want to find out about, or write what you wish, or, like how you wish the world would be.
You wish you knew. Yeah. Write what you wish you knew. Yeah.
I write a lot of dystopians, so maybe not what I wish for, but like how I wish I could react. Yeah. No, I don't wish for the world to be.
Wish for the world to be, no. Okay.
But how I wish I could be brave in this face of like extraordinary circumstances, or how I wish I could rise up and really figure out, like, I love putting characters in really rough situations and then seeing what they can manage to accomplish, what they can, when it's needed, when it's necessary, what can you manage to endure, and what can you manage to figure out?
Sure. How can you push your own limits, right?
Yeah.
Like, to meet a situation that's kind of impossible.
That evolution of a character.
Yeah.
It's great to have strong characters, but the idea that they're strong always or strong throughout is kind of not true to life. We all have rough patches and we all have rough days. To have a character that really evolves, maybe doesn't know their own strength to begin with, or has strength, and then it's, maybe their emotions or their, self-esteem or whatever it is gets, and then they have to rise again. Those are the characters you really root for.
Yeah, absolutely. Characters that make mistakes and then figure out how to deal with that, right?
I can relate to those the best. I think I make 192 mistakes a day, and my child's there to point them out. So, and if she misses one, my husband's there, and if not, there's the cat.
She's only 5. Wait till she's 15. She'll find lots and lots more mistakes.
Yay. Well, and I also have a class of students. So if your shirt's on inside out, they'll tell you, and then they'll reenact it, and then they'll write about it. Yeah. And they'll tell their parents, and then
their homework.
I fell down the stairs a couple years ago. My daughter still does reenactments and just laughs hysterically. She's like, "Remember that time?" And then she acts it out. It's like the best time of her life. I'm like, "Yeah, mommy's okay though. Thanks for asking."
I was teaching I used to teach
theater
in one of the universities here, and I was teaching a theater class, and it was in one of those big auditoriums, and the tech blew. You know what I mean? It just wasn't working, and I had to try and phone and get a tech to come down and fix it and everything. And at the end of the term, I said, to the students to do a skit to show me what they had learned, right? And everybody prepared their little theater presentation, and one of them did me the day that the tech blew. I was like, yeah, I love students.
Oh my gosh.
The day that
great
we have like overhead projectors, and they want the light bulb blew right over my head, and I like screamed. Yeah, that was a good. That made the yearbook quotes. But that's the joy of working with children, living with children, but also writing for children. They have
young people. Yeah.
a good. I mean, you write. Obviously, we've been talking about your Last of the Gifted series. We've been talking about your YA and a lot of references to the book Spirit Sight and Water Sight, but Spirit Sight and Water Sight.
There you go.
But you write a lot for even the younger kids as well, and they're fun. They're funny. I work with 6 and 7-year-olds. They're kind of gross sometimes, but most of the time they're just fun and funny and playful and
curious.
Show you the tooth they pulled out.
Yes. And honest. I love
Yeah.
it. Like, could we not take a lesson in their book and just be honest? Like, I mean, be kind, but like, just be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that approach to the world, right? Just like be more
Yes.
interested in what's around
Yes.
you instead of just where you are, you know, like
The
looking and
blinders,
feeling.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we got the blinders on as we get older and get completely focused, and our view tends to narrow that way.
Miranda, you'll figure this out as yours gets a little older because she can't talk yet. But the things that fascinate them when they learn something for the first time, obviously my kid just started school. She's like, Mom, did you know if you put up your hand, the teacher will like let you talk or come and help you? And I was like, yeah, I do. I'm a teacher. I knew this. She's like, because I just told you. She's like, it's like magic. You do this and they come over. And then now she just sits in our living room. She's like, you stick. Let's go, Paw Patrol snack.
Oh my gosh.
But that idea, I'm like, when did you first learn that for the first time?
Right.
Like you must have had that moment that someone taught you. You're probably in pre-K or kid, and you start talking. The teacher's like, oh, do this. And you're like, what is this magic? There's just that idea that you're going to learn everything for the first time. And it's just so darn cool.
It's fascinating, right? My kid just discovered her hand. She does this. She flips it back and forth and looks at it. And I've caught it on camera once because, like, obviously that's the coolest thing in the world as a parent. But I was like, oh my God, look at it. She's checking out her hand. And as she just sits in her jolly jumper and looks at her hand, I'm like, okay, you can jump. Like, do what you're meant to do. But yeah, I'm in the discovering. I'm in the discovering of the hand, and Jenna's in the discovering of the raised hand.
Yes.
All the phases of life.
Well, it was, I wish we had more time, but I loved listening to your story of travel. It took me back. It's been a while, obviously, with COVID and children and jobs. But, you know, I remember driving through the London countryside with a very nice woman with no side mirrors on her car because they both got clipped off somewhere in London. I was like, these people are scary. I'm just going to tighten my seatbelt. But it's just so nice.
I have to hear your stories. We didn't drive in London. We just took a cab in because we had, I saved up extra money so we could use one of those black cabs, from London. Anyway, we took one in and one out, and then we drove just in, like, from the airport to Northern Wales and back. Right, that's the time that we went.
But that's anxiety enough. Like driving on. First of all, Heathrow is the size of a small town, a medium size. Actually.
and obviously very difficult to get out of because.
Oh my gosh, is it ever? Holy moly! And then you're getting on the left-hand side, right-hand side of the car on the left-hand side of the road. And like you get hand cramps after a while. I'm getting hand cramps just like thinking about it.
I know. And then you get to Northern Wales, right? And you've got like a mountain beside you, and you've got a little bit of a, another lane that's coming at you, right? But it's not really very big, and there's like no shoulders, right? And on the other side, there's like a cliff. So you're either beside the mountain or drop down to the sea.
And then they drive so fast.
I know.
And then the roads where there's just stones on either side. They're just like, I'm like, what if someone's coming? They're like, they'll move. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Or the deal is you keep your eye on the side, like there's turnouts in the road somewhere, and you keep your eye on them. And if something comes at you and it's too big, you're basically supposed to back up into the turnout so that you can let it go by you. There's no room, right?
Oh my goodness. I feel like I just have to put those eye shades on and close my eyes for the ride, or else
we can't when we get there.
Right? What are those like holy crap handles in the car? Like, I would probably be making a lot of noises that I made during
that's
delivering
in Wales they call that the steering wheel.
Oh,
the holy crap handle.
The holy crap.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Thank you for sharing your stories.
I loved it.
It was great. Well, and we're here to talk about writing, but writing is a different process than what some people think. Sometimes writing is staring at the wall. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's traveling. So, and there's so much to it. So it was really nice to hear your perspective on at least the journey for, one book. Maybe not, it's not the same for your other book. So
gosh, no. Yeah, they're all so different, right? Yeah. You keep thinking you're going to get better at it, and then you start a new book and it's like, oh, where am I? What am I doing?
What's the saying? They're like, the more you write, the more you want to get out of writing, and the more you learn about writing, therefore you know more about what you do wrong. And it's like this horrible, lovely spiral of always having to do better. Like you're
always having to do it again. Yeah, do it again.
Yes.
Do it again. Do it again.
Do it again. Practice makes somewhat perfect, and then you learn consistently. It's learning and expanding, taking those blinders off, per se.
Being curious again, right? Just like kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if people want to find out more about you, I know you do editing and workshops as well, but if they want to read your books or find out more about you, where could they find you?
Best place to find me is my website, mariepowell.ca. So it's Marie Powell in Canada, mariepowell.ca. And that's you'll find everything there. I'm on all the social media and all that, but you'll find all the links there and mailing list and so on.
And I really encourage everyone to go and check it out. And I encourage you live in Regina, so wave to my aunt in Ogama because she's an hour away. No one there. 6 people and a truck. But I encourage everyone to go check out Marie Powell's work and connect with her. And maybe you have your own travel stories. It would be great in the comments of this episode if we heard some more interesting travel stories and travel adventures. Maybe on a future episode, I'll talk about the flat tire we got in London, but we don't have time for that. We don't have time for that today. It's an epic story, but we'll save it for another time.
But hey, Marie, you just launched your audiobook for the series too,
That's
right?
True.
So, what better way to do it with traveling is to listen to the audiobook.
Plug it in. Yeah.
And just hammer through it. And I mean, it's okay if you need to turn it down so you can see better if you get lost, because we all do it.
Yeah. That's true.
I always listen to audiobooks when I drive.
Enjoy being lost. Enjoy being lost and listen to the story. You could do that too.
Exactly.
Well, Saskatchewan's so flat that every time I visit my aunt in Ogama, I do have an audiobook because otherwise I'll just fall asleep.
Yeah. You can fall asleep as long as you stay straight. You'll get to your destination.
Yeah.
No. You miss it all if you do that, guys.
Right.
That's why I have the audiobook, and then I stay awake.
It retains.
It doesn't help that probably the last time I drove there, I left at 3 a.m. to make it to my cousin Matt's wedding. So there wasn't a lot to see when it's pitch dark.
That's true. Yeah.
So that's my defense.
Yeah, it's okay.
Also, happy anniversary, Matt and Iko. But just before we wrap up, a big thank you to you, Marie, for being on our show, but also to our show sponsors, Creative Edge Publicity and the Authors Library Network. And of course, the most important part is all our viewers and all our listeners. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.